Good evening, all the joinees. Hi, this is Ansu. I welcome you all to the webinar conducted by NGEN Markets. By the time the others join in, let's have a look at today's webinar topic. So today we would be focusing on overviews of Indian markets and comparing sector-wise indices with each other. So we would be having a major focus on the markets tab of NGEN Markets, which happens to be the landing page. We would compare these market level indices with the global level indices, which are also available on the platform. Post which we could go forward with a detailed analysis of these indices in the compare section. We could use in multiple tabs like the drawdowns, which lets you see how quickly a recovery has happened from the NAV or the levels falling down, the strength of the recovery of each of the index. Followed by, we would also have a look at the correlation analysis, lets you see how two funds or two levels, two indices for that matter, are related to each other in terms of their NAV movement. Following which, we would be looking at the risk versus return scatter plot, plotting the index based on its risk and returns as a parameter and drawing observations out of which. And lastly, we would be looking at point-to-point analysis, which basically lets us create customized scenarios of your own. And in the end, the quorum would be open for a Q&A session. You can either unmute yourself or write down your query in the chat box. So let us begin. So this is our landing page on NGEN Markets, which is the Markets tab. And today's topic would also revolve around the Markets tab right here. So what you could see in the Markets tab is this overview page. And in this overview page, you could see the market level indices right here, the Indian equity sector indices, and as well the world equity sector indices as well. Now, what you could do is simply plot them onto this line graph just by one click. Every time you log on to the platform, Nifty 50 is something that gets automatically plotted on this line chart. Now, in order to just remove this, you could simply click on this gray icon. And in order to plot it back again, let's say I select Nifty 50 and maybe a Nifty 500. And from the NSE index, let's say I select the mid cap and small cap as a sector. Now, just by clicking on them, you see these have gotten plotted onto these line graph. And as of now, the start date that we are currently focusing on is on 10th Jan 2010. This is what it automatically picks up. You can anytime change this. Just click on this gray section and input the time that you want to rather analyze this or rather see the movements of these index. Let's say I just want to run this for the last 5 years. I simply click on 2019 and I select, let's say, June. So based on the start date, what you're seeing currently on the line graph is basically the movements of these index for the last 5 years, starting from 3rd June 2019. Now, what you see right here on top, these are the returns that have been generated by these respective index for the last 5 years. And based on these returns, what we could see is the best that has been achieved is by Nifty Midcap 100 to an extent of 193%, followed by Nifty Small Cap 100. Now, once you just look at this line graph, you can just see they are getting plotted on the line graph. But as of now, a fair comparison of them, or rather these index, is not possible because they are starting from their respective level, meaning Nifty is rather starting from 11,000 level, Nifty 500 starting from 9,000. So a fair comparison as such is not possible. What we are seeing is just plotting of these index on the line graph. And in order to cater that so that we could have in a fair comparison, we have this option of rebase on the platform. So you could simply click on this checkbox. And what happens is rather it gets rebased to a single start point of 100, which lets you see in a fair comparison. Now, post this, you could see that Nifty Midcap is something that has been plotted on the very top, which basically would be because it would have generated the best returns in the last 5 years that we are seeing. Now you could anytime take these are showing the levels right here on the line graph. Let's say you want to run an analysis on them, you could anytime take them right here to the compare section. Now right here in the compare section, how you could load in these index is right here. In this add other items option, you could simply search for these indices. Let's say I'll input Nifty 50, a Nifty 500, Nifty small cap 100, and a Nifty mid cap 100. And now let's say we compare this with the respective category average. And that option is right here as well, just below where you search the indices. You could anytime input the category average. So I'll input small cap as a category average, followed by large cap and mid cap. Right. And I'll input in a common start date for the fair analysis. What we had taken right in the market section, markets tab, was June 1st, 2019. And the option to change the start date in the compare section is you simply click on the settings wheel, input a start date that I mentioned, which was last 5 years, 3rd June, and I click go. Right. Now, based on the analysis or the data for the last 5 years, let's say I just saw this on the basis of its CAGR. So we could see that this category average small cap is rather able to beat its specific benchmark that we have currently taken under consideration. The benchmark of small cap gave in a CAGR for the last 5 years to an extent of 21%, while the category average was rather able to beat its specific benchmark. It generated a higher level of CAGR to an extent of 25.8%. Now, such analysis is something that you could do right here in this compare section. This was basically a broad-based index that I had taken in. I'll again go back to the markets tab. Here, what you see is basically a line chart for which a screenshot option is also possible. Every section that you see a camera icon lets you take in a section-specific screenshot. And what we also have is a CSV download option, lets you download the active selection data that you see in this line graph. As of now, what I have selected is Nifty 50, mid cap 100, small cap 100, and Nifty 500. Once I click on this CSV download option, I would be able to see their levels in that specific time duration. I'll just show the Excel download. Right. So for the actively selected levels that were there on the line graph, you would be able to see the data points starting from 4th June 2019 up until the latest date. Right. You can see it up until 7th June, the latest levels for the active selections that we have done it. Right. I again go back to our landing page, which is basically the markets tab. Now, these were basically the broad-based market level index, Indian market level index. What you could also do is plot the global index as well onto the line graph. And the global levels are available right here. World Equity Market Index is something that you could see right here. Let's say I select a NASDAQ and maybe a Dow Jones. And similarly, just by one click, you see they have gotten loaded onto this line graph. And out of this entire list, we see Dow Jones had generated the least amount of returns for the last 5 years to an extent of 56% only. Now, this entire data that you see in the markets tab, the overview, could be instantly generated in a PDF manner. Right here, what you could see is market wrap as an option. You simply click on that and a PDF gets generated on your end instantly. Now, these are basically live PDFs, meaning the active selection, active PDF, the active selections that you had done on the line graph is something that gets shown in the overview once you click on that PDF as an option. Now, let's say you rather do not want Dow Jones or NASDAQ to be seen in that PDF. You could simply click on them once again. Since they have been actively selected, they are shown in gray. You could simply click back and the active selection gets removed. And now let's say you just want to take in a market trap without those global index. You again click on that data and you see in this line graph, there are no global index. And this market wrap that you see, it would be co-branded. Your company name and logo would appear on the top left-hand side. Now, what we analyzed right now was all the broad-based index. Let's say I just want to analyze this Indian equity sector index. So these can also be loaded onto this line graph. So maybe I just want to remove the active selections currently from this line graph. I'll again just select or rather checkbox on this specific index right here. And they have gotten removed. Now in the Indian equity sector that you see, there is a toggle button. You can just put in a check for this BSE or the NSE that helps you to toggle between either of the two indices. And also you could see in a graphical presentation, bar graphs is something that you could see for the top 10 and worst 10 performing sectors for both NSE as well as for BSE. And this data is something that is available for the 12 months, 6 months, 3 months, and 1 month data right here. And now let's say I'll just load them onto this line graph. I'll select few of these NSE indices, maybe Nifty Auto, Nifty IT, Nifty Bank, Nifty FMCG, and maybe Nifty Energy. So simply clicking on them, they get loaded onto this line graph. So on this line graph, what you could see is currently just plotting of the levels. Let's say, and the time duration is something that you could set in. Let's say you want to run an analysis on these indices, you could anytime do that in this compare section. So I go to the compare section, I empty the current list, and I already had saved a list on my end. NSE indices. I had selected in a few NSE indices and I had saved on my end. And let's say I just want to run the analysis for these NSE indices for the last 5 years. So the start date, I think, remains same because I had initially put in the same 5-year time duration analysis. And I'll just simply click on go. Now, let's say I just want to see which of this specific sector is the most riskier, or meaning has the greater amount of volatility within itself. So for that, I would come to this standard deviation as an option, which lets me see the risk as a parameter for each of the sectoral indices. I simply clicked on the column heading or as standard deviation, and the data could get arranged either in the ascending or in the descending order. Now, if we just look at the standard deviation, the highest is that for Nifty PSU Bank. The highest risk was undertaken by this specific sector. And at the same time, the returns that was generated by the same sector was very minimum. It took in a greater level of risk to an extent of 37% in the last 5 years. But the return that it could generate was only to an extent of 17%. So you could say that this was a sector which undertook a greater level of risk, but was not able to generate an equivalent amount of return for that level of risk. While on the other hand, if we just locate at maybe realty as a sector, we could see it took in greater level of risk, but it also had a considerable amount of returns along with it as well. Now, we can also see this in a scatter plot as well. The risk and returns is a parameter. For that, I go to this risk versus return tab, which is basically a scatter plot, letting us see how this index currently that we have loaded in the main list are plotted on risk and return as a parameter, of course, for the time duration that is under consideration. Now, let's say I just change this time duration for the last 5 years. Okay, so on the x-axis, what we could see is annualized risk, which is basically standard deviation. And on the y-axis, what we could see is annualized return. And the entire scatter plot is divided into 4 quadrants: low risk, high return, low risk, low return, high risk, low return, and high risk, high return. Now, if any fund or any index gets plotted on the extreme right-hand side of this scatter plot, we would say those are the ones which have higher level of risk in comparison to the ones which gets plotted on the extreme left hand side. Those would have a lower level of risk. And in a similar manner, if a component or an index gets plotted on the upper end of y-axis, those are the ones which would have higher level of return in comparison to the ones which gets plotted on the lower end of y-axis. Now, clearly we could see right here, Nifty, PSU and bank. We saw that the risk percentage was nearly higher or the highest for this specific sector. But at the same time, the returns that it was able to generate was rather very low. And at the same time, we see Nifty 50 to be on the extreme left-hand side, basically saying that this was a specific sector that generated a lower level of return and also undertook a lower level of risk. Now, let's say I just compare these two sectors, Nifty Auto and Nifty Bank. So we could see that their risk percentage are kind of near to each other, while the returns that has been generated by Nifty Auto is rather higher than that of Nifty Banks as a sector. So such analysis of these sectoral indices could also be done on risk and return as a parameter, considering the time duration that you have input. Now, we also have an option to download this risk versus return as a parameter in an Excel format as well. So you would be able to see two columns, risk and returns. Right. So you see risk as the first column, returns as the second column, and the names of each of the component that have been plotted on the scatter plot is what you could see. Now, this was risk and return as a parameter. Let's say what you want to see is rather the strength of these index to bounce back from any loss or downfall in terms of its level. How quickly did it recover from that downfall? You could anytime go to this drawdowns tab. So here, depending on the start date that you input, since I was running the analysis for all the tabs for the last 5 years, I'll do the same right here as well. 3rd June 2019 is what I have taken in. So in the compare tab, what you could see in the drawdowns tab specifically shows you the top 5 drawdowns or losses that was experienced by each of this index as of now that I have loaded in. What you could see are 3 columns: size, length, and recovery. Size basically tells you the magnitude of loss or downfall that was experienced by each of this index, followed by length, specifying the number of days, meaning the number of working days it was taken by each of this index to working days taken by each of this index during that specific fall time, followed by the recovery, letting you see how quickly did that index recover from a loss or a reduction in its level that happened. Let's say I simply click on this history icon. You click on the graph icon, it lets you see in detail the loss that happened. So as of now, we are focusing on Nifty Realty. You see the highest loss has been mentioned right here in the very first column. 51% was the loss experienced by this index, wherein the level was at 331, and this level started falling and it reached a level of 162. Now, how many days did it took? We saw right here. 109 days was taken for this specific fall. And when did this fall in terms of its level happened? It happened from 31st Jan 2020 to 19th May 2020. So, meaning a total of 109 days were there when the levels were starting to fall down. Now, post this date of 19th May 2020, it took a total of 170 days for this sector or for this level to be reclaimed, meaning 170 days to cross this starting level of 331. And the recovery happened on 12th Jan 2021, meaning it crossed this starting level on 12th Jan 2021. You could anytime plot these levels on this line graph. These are also available for mutual funds. And the gray region shows when there was a downfall in terms of the level, and the white region shows the recovery period. Now, let's say I simply saw this on the basis of its recovery. So we could see Nifty Pharma, although the loss period was to an extent of 294. It completely recovered this loss in only 13 days, and followed by Nifty IT. From its worst drawdown, you see the worst drawdown was to an extent of 33%, and it continued on for a total of 33 days, and it took a total of 83 days for this sector to completely recover from this loss of 33%. This was the drawdowns. Next, we move on to the correlations tab, which specifically lets us see how two sectors right now, since I have taken in sectoral NSE sectors in the main list, how two sectors are correlated with each other in terms of its NAV movement. Now, meaning this would help you to ensure diversification on a portfolio level. Let's say I've just kept my cursor on this 0.29 percentage. So this says that if the levels of Nifty IT moves up, 29% of times the levels of Nifty Auto will also move up in the similar direction. Now, this basically says that there is very minimum correlation between Nifty IT as a sector and Nifty Auto as a sector, meaning you could take in stocks from these specific sectors, maybe Nifty IT and Nifty Auto, because they do not have much greater correlation. So a downfall in the price of any IT stock would not affect the downfall in any of the auto stocks. So such analysis based on showing the diversification could be done using this correlation analysis. And correlation ranges from -1 to +1. The more closer it is to +1, the stronger is their correlation. And on our platform, we calculate these correlation on a daily basis, meaning what we show is a 260 data points for the purpose of calculation of correlation. So this basically ensures that there is a data accuracy, because what we have is 260 data points, which is equivalent to 1 year on the platform. For this was basically a correlation. What we have next is this point-to-point analysis, which basically lets you create in scenarios of your own and see what would have been a final value generated by each of the scheme or each of the index based on the lump sum figure that you have input. Now, what you could see is the first 5 buckets, first bucket being the 10-year time duration. And as I mentioned, these are editable. You could insert in multiple start dates and end dates within this 5 buckets that you see. Let's say I just change this to rather the election time duration. So I'll go to 2024, select 3rd June as my start date and 4th June as my end date. Now, since the time duration that is under consideration is less than a year, I'll rather go to this absolute as a option to see the actual returns, actual absolute returns. Now, I simply sort this. So you see during the election time duration, the 1-day return that you're seeing, you could see that Nifty, PSU and banks as a sector fell the most, while there was this Nifty FMCG that was rather in the positive quadrant. It did not even touch the negative sector, negative point. And you can anytime see this in a graphical manner, for which a screenshot option can also be taken in. Now, let's say I create in one more scenario, maybe an year-to-date scenario. I'll go to 2024, Jan 1. Right. Now, this as well is a time duration which is less than 1. So we would still stay in this absolute as a column for seeing the returns. Now, in this year-to-date column, we could see Nifty IT as a sector is the one that was worst affected in this year-to-date time duration, while Nifty Realty is the one that had generated the best absolute return in the year-to-date time duration. Now, simply, let's say I just sort this data on the basis of its 3-year time duration, or rather 1-year time duration. What we could see is this Nifty Realty as a sector has continuously been a stagnantly performing, or rather a good performing sector is something that we could see. The second bucket was rather a 3-year time duration, third bucket being a 1-year time duration, and the last bucket being a year-to-date time duration. In all these 3 scenarios, we could see that Nifty Realty had rather given in a consistent performance. And the CAGR as an option could be used when the time duration that is under consideration is more than a year. And if you wish to see this in numerical terms, you could anytime select this lump sum value as an option. Now, what we were currently focusing was on all the NSE sectors. You could anytime replicate this on the BSE sectors as well. So I'll just reset this specific list. And let's say I have already created a list, and I'll just load that list. So the list has rather gotten loaded in. Let's say I just go to the risk versus return scatter plot and put in a time duration of maybe the last 5 years, let's say. Right. So based on risk and returns as a parameter, what we could see is this BSE metal is a sector that has rather taken in higher level of risk, but at the same time, it is generating the maximum amount of return out of this entire list that I have currently loaded in the mean list. While if we locate at BSE FMCG, the sector that is towards the very extreme left-hand side, taking in the least amount of risk and generating the least amount of return. While if you compare maybe auto and this oil and gas as a sector, these are the sectors that have similar level of risk, but their returns are different. BSE auto gives you a greater level of return when you compare it with BSE oil as a sector. And now let's say if I just want to focus on a specific election scenario, let's say. So these buckets, once you create them, unless and until you change them, you come on the platform and change the time duration, they remain same. So I have saved this specific scenario. And now let's say I just go to this absolute as an option to see the absolute return. And I simply sort. Right. So we could see the worst affected sector out of this 7 sectors is oil and gas. And even in the BSE sector, we could see that FMCG has rather not gone in the negative side. The 1-day return for this specific sector was still 0.15. That is what something we saw in the NSE sector as well. So you could say that this is a sector which is rather resilient to the movements of the market, followed by the drawdowns, which lets you see the strength of that specific index to recover from the loss that has occurred. Let's say now I analyze this for the last 3 years. Right. So based on, in terms of its size, we see that BSE metal has the highest loss. The magnitude was to an extent of 36%. Now the analysis remains the same. Simply click on this graph icon. It lets you see in detail what was the loss that was experienced by this specific sector. You see the loss was to an extent of 36%, wherein the level was at 23,500. And this level started falling and it reached 15,000. And this happened from 11th April 2020 to 22 June 2022. So the time duration, the length that was taken was a total of 72 days. That is what this length means. Now, next to that, we see recovery 344, meaning it took a total of 344 working days for BSE metal as a sector to recover from this loss of 36%. And the recovery happened on 17th October 2023. Now, if we want to see which was the sector that recovered quickly, I just simply click on this recovery as an option. It has gotten sorted and we can see BSE Auto was the sector that recovered the quickest in terms of its worst drawdown in the last 3 years. While BSE Metal was the one which took the maximum number of days to rather recover from this loss. So that is it for the topic related webinar. If anyone has any query, you can either unmute yourself or type down your question in the chat box.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, please let us know.
Yeah, can you give example of mutual funds also, like within a sector which mutual fund has given? good returns versus the risk,
Of
like
course, of course.
PSU sector and mid cap sector, some basic sectors and caps.
Correct. I understand. So, the topic of today's webinar was predominantly around sectors. Therefore, during the entire session, we specifically focused on sectors only. However, you could replicate the same analytics even on a list of mutual funds, right? So, for an example, if you are to analyze some mutual funds, right? In this case, we have taken some.
Mutual funds also have like sectors like PSU, infra.
Of course, yes.
You can see
If
in
you
that
want to,
category also.
okay. Understand. So, Ansu, let's go to the fund section and maybe let's take in sector specific funds. So, sectoral funds. Maybe let's go for sectoral FMCG. Let's go for sectoral auto. Maybe sectoral banking. Yeah, these three, and maybe pharma, sectoral pharma.
IT and PSU infra, they are actually more in demand.
Okay, so do you want me to take infotech as well?
IT,
Because auto is something that we've.
PSU
Yeah,
also,
PSU
and
banking.
infrastructure
No.
also. No, PSU is a sector. It includes ONGC also and every company also. So PSU mutual funds, we have PSU mutual funds.
No, understand. But in this case, this is as per the SEBI categorization of it. In this case, these are the sectoral indices that you can see, right? And these are the ones that we have taken. Sectoral pharma is something that you can add, and then you click and close. You'll get a list of all the funds that belong to these particular sectors in this particular list. Now you can specifically sort them on the basis of basic non-negotiable filter parameters. Right, let's say you want only those funds which have been around for a period of at least 5 years or more. So you say minimum age is 5, and then you click on apply. Right, the list gets shortened to a list of 33 funds now. Of course, they are from different diverse categories. Let's say we want to compare couple of funds from every category. Therefore, on the basis of NGEN FS, right? That is our ranking that we are giving to funds across each of the sectors. On this basis, we are going to compare couple of funds from every sector, right? And take them to the compare section. So for sectoral FMCG, we're going to take in Nippon India Consumption Fund. For banking, we're going to take in Sundaram Finserv Opportunities. For pharma, we could take iPro PhD, Pharma Healthcare and Diagnostics, Franklin India Technologies. These are 4 that are done. Maybe you can take a couple of them more and then directly go to the compare section.
Okay.
Right. Once this is done, you go to the compare section. That is how all of these funds get added. Right. So we have a decent list here, right here. And then of course we have a couple of flexi cap, but let that be. Right. Now in this case, you could replicate the same analytics, right? First, what you could do is you could compare, okay, which of these funds have actually managed to generate a better return as compared to that of the benchmark. Of course, benchmark will be different for different categories. In this case, we have taken in Nifty 500 as a more of a generalistic or a broad-based benchmark, right? Of course, you could add in sectoral benchmarks. So Nifty Pharma, Nifty Auto can be added. But in this case, when we compare it with the Nifty 500, the CAGR of that particular index is 16.87. On the other hand, all the other funds that we have currently loaded actually managed to generate a better CAGR. Now, what is the time duration we've considered for this? That can be checked right there by clicking on the settings wheel. We've considered last 5 years. So that's 3rd June 2019 to, of course, latest. Right? Now you could check risk and return positioning of each of these funds by simply clicking on risk versus return scatter plot. In this case, you can see from 2018 to 2024, this is how the positioning looks like. So pharma, healthcare, and diagnostics, ICICI happens on the extreme, rather plots on the extreme left-hand side, right? It has the lowest level of risk, but it has decent level of return. For that matter, HSBC FlexiCap, in spite of taking in higher levels of risk, it has not been able to match the return that ICICI PhD has, typically generated, right? Of course, this is between 2018 to 2024. The moment you change the period, this is subject to change. The positioning of these funds on the risk and return scatter plot will change. right? So you could replicate the same analytics that we, a couple of the parameters that we just showed, right? So drawdowns, risk versus return, comparison with CAGR, standard deviation, or for that matter, even point to point, on any list of securities that you add in the main list. For the webinar purpose, we added sectors, right? Benchmarks. But you could replicate that by adding some mutual funds. This is how you can do it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. Please tell me.
Yeah, good evening. I was just thank you for, providing this Excel sheet icon here in the risk
Yeah,
versus return. This
sure,
now
sir. We
I'm
are
just
that way very
waiting.
receptive to feedback.
I'm
Yeah,
waiting
we
for
keep
the
on adding.
remaining one.
Yeah. Of course, sir, we have
So
that in our to-do list. We are continuously releasing updates. Whenever
yes,
we release those updates, we will definitely,
yeah, this is the one
after
which you
every two
released
months.
immediately. Thanks a lot. I was
Yeah,
waiting for the drawdowns, the ulcer index and the Martin's ratio.
sure. We'll release that soon
Yeah,
and then
that is
we'll
a
give you
little difficult one. It will take some time, I know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So hopefully, I hope that it's all in the pipeline and it is being worked on.
It is in our to-do list. Yes.
Okay. Any tentative time which would come up with, say 2 months, 3 months?
So honestly, I would not be able to give you timelines, but once this is released, we will definitely, notify you one on email. I mean, that is directly released by our CTO, Arunam Mukherjee. He writes an email for all of our users with all the latest developments that have been released. Additionally, because it's your a specific requirement, we will definitely give you a call as well. The product team will, right? Unfortunately, we will
No
not be
problem.
able to give you timelines as such.
No issue, no issue, no issue. Out of the do list, I must thank you that you people have got it immediately done. This one.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, see to it that this particular Excel sheet is also available in the portfolio comparison thing.
Yes, absolutely. Portfolio level risk versus return.
Yeah,
Surely.
there I
We've,
think इसमें हो जाता है
um,
जनरल में, उसमें नहीं रहता है.
huh. Sure, we will look into it particularly, and yeah, if it's in this case it's not yet released for portfolio
Yeah, so
level risk versus return, we
wherever
will
the
definitely give
functions
you.
are there more than one times being repeated, do tell the computer or the programmer to give it there also,
Sure, sure, sir.
right? Thank you, thanks a lot. And also, I was just trying to request, the individual risk ratio and the return strength ratios, which where once you click the fund, you have it. So probably, I have to look into every fund after clicking it. So instead of that, along with the engine score, if you can also put that, that would be comfortable.
Sure, sure. The risk score and the return score in isolation, independent. Yes, yes. We
Yeah,
have noted down
the place
that
the funds
the
and the
last time when I
compare where
was.
the engine score is there. Besides that,
Of course,
these
of
two
course.
scores can be, workable and good,
Understand, understand. Yes.
right? It will make sense. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
And this indices was also a nice way of looking at things. Good idea.
Thank you, sir.
Prajakta
Thank
ma'am, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Ma'am, can we upload any cash statements for just doing the analysis for mutual fund?
Yes, we do have something called as statement analyzer, which lets you onboard eCAS file of your clients, right? So ECAS file has to be either of these three. So NSDL, CDS, or CAMS is what we support, and it has to be a original ECAS. Do not make any changes while saving that ECAS, like removing the passwords, or for that matter, making any modifications with the names or something like that, because the statement analyzer tool fails to read them, right? Therefore, we request you to upload the original ones only. Once you have it from your clients, then you click on choose a file, right? You would have saved it in your system. You click on that and you locate where the file is saved. So this is the test CDSL file. You put in the file password, which is generally always the PAN number for NSDL CDSL statements. It will show a pop-up that, okay, this is a recognized file type. And then you click
Okay.
on process and save. The moment you do that, the processing will start running. Basically, the statement analyzer tool will start running. And in the next 20 odd seconds, it will save the file on the right hand side. It will say, okay, the date when it was uploaded, this was 7th of June, quarter to 5 p.m., and the file AUM, right? And of course, the name of the client. Once this is uploaded, you go back on the NGEN Markets main platform, go to the portfolios section, that's second last tab, then go on add a new portfolio. In this case, because it is to be loaded from the statement analyzer, click load from statement analyzer, click on the plus icon, all the holdings from the ECAS. Now, by all, I mean mutual funds and stocks. And always the current values only will get saved, or rather, populated into the portfolios section of NGEN Markets. You need to give it a name and then click on create. Please note, you have to click on create, only then the portfolio will get saved. Only then you need to
Okay.
click on run. That's how you can run a detailed portfolio analytics from a ECAS statement.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Projector, hello.
Hello. Yes, yes. Please tell me.
Yeah, projector, because further to this, what you showed as a, the cash statement, can we not, suggest mutual fund schemes against this shares?
Unfortunately, sir, we do not have an advisory license. So, by regulations, we're not permitted to advise, or for that matter, recommend new schemes, right? But if you have already a model mutual fund portfolio saved into your system, of course, into NGEN Markets, then you could compare two portfolios side by side, which could be one could be a direct equity portfolio, and the other could be a mutual fund portfolio, right? Like we have compared to portfolios, right? So on the left hand side, you can load in a direct equity portfolio of a prospective. For example, in this case, as we are loading the stocks portfolio only. And on the right hand side, you could load in a portfolio of mutual funds only that you are suggesting to the client to move towards, right?
Okay.
So that is how you can create a side by side comparison versus a stocks portfolio to a mutual funds only portfolio. Right? Of course, you can set in the start and end dates and show this side-by-side comparison on different parameters, performance, how does the risk allocation looks like. So what is the volatility of the two portfolios taken together? What are the exposures? Right. So in this case, we see not just does the annual return improve, but the volatility also drops 7%, right? From 20% in the stocks portfolio, it drops to about 14% in the mutual fund portfolio, right? Other parameters like asset allocation, exposures, rolling returns are available as well. And finally, when you are wanting to maybe make a presentation out of that, you can generate a PDF, comparative PDF, and take this into a PDF. So either a rupee based or a standard percentage based PDF. In this case, we are showing you a percentage based PDF. The initial 3 pages are exactly going to be the same. The last page is where it shows, okay, this is the existing allocation, and this is what target should be to achieve the excess returns that we are talking at the top. That's it. So this is like an actionable proposal for it.
Okay. Okay. So, but it is the mutual fund side, I'll have to select an appropriate one to compare and then send.
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay, okay. I was just looking at, from the list of the stocks, we can pull out the equivalent mutual fund scheme, closed by 80 to 90% equivalent scheme, and then suggest the comparable mutual fund scheme to the customer.
Yeah. Yeah, the list of, or rather, for that matter, the portfolio of mutual fund has to, be chosen.
Here it is
It
a
could be
manual exercise. Here it is a
Yes, yes,
manual
it is.
exercise where I need to go through the entire mutual fund scheme of schemes, look into the individual stocks, where and how and all, and then pull. So that's the great amount of work. Whereas, in accordance to the stock probabilities, the name of the stocks and the percentages and the amount and all, with that kind of probability, if mutual fund can be pulled out, or say,
No, sure, I
comparable to
could give
the
you a very easy, effective way of doing that. What you could do is you simply go to the fund section. Let's say in a client's portfolio, there are three stocks. We'll take a simple example. You go to holdings analysis, right? And you know that there are three stocks in the client's portfolio, one being Tata Steel. You go to equity holdings, right?
Okay.
First is Tata Steel. You search for Tata Steel here, you get a list of all the mutual funds who hold into Tata Steel as a stock, right? It will show, choose the other one. I think there were two Tata Steels. The second, yeah. Yeah. So you see, there are 20,586 crores invested in 319 funds into Tata Steel as a stock. Now, you sort this on the basis of highest holding, which in this case is default, by default. So DSP, Natural Resources and New Energy Fund, holds 8.73% of its portfolio into Tata Steel. That's the highest across categories, across all mutual funds. So this is the one mutual fund that you have shortlisted. Number two, just search for the second stock. Let's say that happens to be a Zomato. Just type in Zomato, and then get a list of mutual funds holding onto that. Choose a couple of, maybe, you could choose second best, third best, which holds highest, and then make a portfolio of these mutual funds that you've shortlisted, right? And then create a portfolio of that. So that's very easy. That's not a tedious exercise. It will of course require 5-10 minutes, but that will be required to create a model portfolio.
Okay. 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 I still need to go around. Yeah. Okay. I thought, at the software level, that would be much easier if you configure and program that this is the stock statement, and comparable to that, valuation and the number of holdings in the percentage form. These are the schemes, or this is the best, closest 75%, 70%, 80%, 90% closest to this. Anyway,
Unfortunately, sir, for the platform, it will not be possible for us to, throw up results which will say, okay, these are the schemes you need to go ahead with. These are the schemes you should include in your portfolio, because that will amount to a regulatory, violation. We cannot venture into that. We do not have advisory license.
no, I'm not saying from the advisory license. I'm saying from a comparison kind of a thing. Say you are my client and you are investing in stocks, and that is around 1 crore worth of portfolio, right? Then, so I take a statement, I analyze it. I analyze it here in NGEN, and that's it. So it lies there. So that if there are 50 stocks or 30 stocks, then I need to work around like this. Then there will be 30 funds which will come into the play, and then I have to proportion all those things, and then come out with. So that again will be a difficult thing. It is not an exact apple to apple match. It will be maybe because something else. So that's what it is. Yeah. So I want to make my client who is into stocks want to suggest him that it is better that if you go for mutual fund. So there I need to have a comparison that your stock statement says that for 10-year holding, your 10 lakh has become 1 crore or whatever in 20 years time. Here, if you invest, or you would have invested in mutual fund, like in a similar set of stocks, and this thing, the same would have turned to 1.5 crores or 2 crores or 1.25 crores, or better Sharpe, or better Sortino, or better down, good
Sure,
Hi,
drawdown.
that is exactly.
this is Deb here.
Yeah.
This is the best way of doing this is to just
Whatever once you upload the his ECAS or something, whatever NSL series or statement, you
Yeah.
can get the stocks data and you can make a portfolio of the stocks, keep it, save it, make a mutual fund portfolio which is up your model portfolio, do a portfolio
Okay.
comparison, and immediately you can tell how your model portfolio has done better than the stock portfolio that the current he's holding currently. That's the best
Okay.
way. A lot of people, a lot of advisors, even the banks are suggesting the customers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just on a stock level basis.
Yeah. This is a stock level. You make a stock only portfolio, and make a mutual fund portfolio. Suggest the customer that how it has been done better than his stock portfolio over the last 5 years, 10 years, whatever time period you choose.
Let me check. Let me check.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
If there is no more questions, Prajakta, you can wrap it up.
Yes, sir. Ansu, you can please close for the day.
Yes, sure. Thank you all for joining in. You can anytime visit our YouTube page. So there is a dedicated playlist for all the webinars that have been conducted up until now. Today's webinar will also get uploaded right here. A total of 115 videos have been uploaded. Thank you all for joining in. Hope to see you again next week with a new topic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.